Hi, Rohini. Nice to see you. Good morning, everyone. We are waiting for one more panelist. We'll get started in a couple of minutes.
I think, hi Tanvi, did you join? I think you joined via Dorothy ID.
Okay. In that case, we can probably get started.
I think we can ask her first to rename or maybe. Hi Tanvi.
Tanvi, could you hear us?
I don't see Tanvi.
I think
she might have joined with Dorothy.
Joined using Dorothy ID.
Okay. He will probably get started in the meantime. Okay, we'll probably get started. We are 4 minutes into the session. Hello. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. A very warm welcome to our Hyperledger India chapter hosted event. So we are proud to announce that this is the third time we are conducting a session on celebrating exceptional women who are in blockchain technology space. And today we have with us an esteemed panel. And this panel will be moderated by Daniela. You might already be know her. So she is executive director at the Hyperledger Foundation, and she's also general manager for blockchain and identity at the Linux Foundation. And then we have Goessens, who is co-founder at Animo Solutions, and we are then joining by Tanvi, who is founder and CEO at Policy 4.0. And then we have Rohini Trehan, who is a senior leader from Infosys. And then we have Shilpa Sood, who is General Manager at Digital Technologies. So now I'll get this started. We'll get this started. So over to you, Daniela.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Arun, for hosting this very special season 3 of Women in Blockchain. And thank you to the Hyperledger India chapter for continuously being champions, not only in enterprise blockchain, but also in making sure that our Hyperledger global community continues to be a diverse place for anyone to participate, and that all are welcome. I'm very excited today to be dialing in or zooming in, I guess, from San Francisco, California, where it's Friday night at 10 p.m. And our panelists are also dialing in from all over the world, and we'll give everybody a chance to introduce themselves and to tell us a little bit about the work that they do. Today, we're going to have a discussion really around 3 key topics. First one is blockchain for social good. What have we been seeing in the market, and where are the initiatives that the audience should understand that blockchain is making an impact in? We're also going to talk a bit about digital assets and CBDCs, so central bank digital currencies, as well as regulations. How is regulations really moving the market and really affecting the work that every single one of us does for our companies, for our customers, and for our communities as well. And then we'll talk a bit about the industry transformation that is going on today, primarily from the journey from Web 2 to Web 3, and how blockchain, and more importantly, how the skills that everyone in this Hyperledger community has been working on since 2016 will really enable and help us in that transformation from Web 2 to Web 3 as we are seeing in the market. So welcome to the panelists, and Tanvi, nice to meet you, and we'll go ahead and get started. So once again, thank you everybody for joining us today for the Women in Blockchain series. I am going to introduce the speakers, and as part of this, I'm going to ask each panelist to tell us a little bit about themselves, maybe share with us why you believe you got selected to be on this panel for Women in Blockchain. Tell us a little bit about what you do at the companies that you support, and what your companies do as well. So Rohini, it's a pleasure to meet you. Rohini Trehan from Infosys. It's great to see you online today, and really looking forward to the conversation. Maybe you can just take a couple of minutes, introduce yourself, why you're here today, and what does Infosys do in the space that the audience should know about?
Thank you, Daniela, and I'm glad to be here. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Rohini Trehan. I'm Senior Director at Infosys. I lead the blockchain practice at Infosys. And in my previous avatar, I was managing financial services clients, driving digital transformation. And at a certain point, this was in late 2016, I took up the responsibility to incubate a blockchain center of excellence for financial services. And since then, evolved and switched full-time into managing the blockchain practice at Infosys. So Infosys is a global leader, as all of you must be aware, in next generation digital services and consulting. And we enable clients across more than 50 countries. Infosys has been investing extensively on blockchain work. We created our own blockchain, a Bitcoin fork, way back in 2015. And thereafter, the blockchain practice is devoted to all industry verticals. So we do comprehensive both consulting and technology work, and we keep experimenting with technologies. Of course, the primary focus being the Hyperledger suite of technologies. That is where we're seeing a lot of traction. So glad to be here today. Thank you, Daniela.
Excellent. Rohini, welcome once again. Quick question for the audience in case they don't know. Can you tell us a little bit about what a blockchain of excellence does in an organization like Infosys, just so that people understand that context?
Sure. So blockchain, really, we are investing. So we are investing as a service provider. Okay. We have invested as a technology creator as well. So we work towards creating ecosystems in partnership with clients. In certain areas, we invest in ecosystems ourselves with key sponsors. For example, we have created Trade Connect payments and identity ecosystems. And but it is important, and I'm sure that the folks who are working on blockchain would be aware that the business domain is a very strong dimension of blockchain to realization of value, and therefore Infosys, blockchain practice invests heavily in analyzing, in doing deep domain research to identify blockchain candidates, to do extensive evaluation of the technologies where there's a strong fitment, and then marry the two. And that is how we drive our consulting, both for clients as well as in-house in creating ecosystems.
Excellent, wonderful, very helpful. And we'll hit upon a couple of those topics a little bit later on as well. So welcome once again. Next, I'd like to introduce Shilpa Sood from HCL. Shilpa, if you could do the same, introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about why you think you're here today, and what does HCL do?
Thanks, Daniela. So I've been doing digital transformation consulting for about 15 years now. And starting from when, it was about digitalization, moving to digital practices, I've been working with customers to see how the new technologies fit in their current ecosystems. And as soon as blockchain came in, and now with metaverse, I've been doing the same in both of them as well, working with customers, seeing what use cases can they do on top of blockchain, how can they fit it in their current ecosystem, and what's their future roadmap with new technologies look like, so that it's scalable, because that's how quickly technologies change. And that's my area of focus. I've been part of the blockchain practice in HCL since it was incubated in 2016. And currently my role is to liaison with the sales team, create vertical solutions on top of blockchain, understand use cases that can be developed, and then working with the technology director for blockchain to help that develop those solutions and take them to customers, do POCs and help implement them. So I work both with our consulting practices to ensure that customers understand where blockchain fits in, as well as our partners around all the product spaces and our technology and COE to develop those solutions and take them forward.
Excellent. Well, I think, when one thinks about digital transformation, right, without digital transformation, even very early in the blockchain space, blockchain solutions wouldn't work, right? You need to have digital transformation. Today, as we think about, and we'll talk a bit about the industry transformation journey, specifically from a Web 2 and to Web 3 and what's happening today in the internet, I think that digital transformation takes on an even more greater personal to individual matters as well. So we'd love to explore that a little bit later on as well. So Shilpa, thank you for joining us, and we look forward to this discussion. Next, I'd like to ask Anna Goessens at Animo to do the same. Introduce yourself to this audience. Tell us a little bit about what you do there and the work that Animo does. And I know it's early morning for you this morning, so tell us where you were zooming in from, Anna.
Yeah, hi everyone. For me, it's very early. It's 7 in the morning on a Saturday from Utrecht in the Netherlands. But very happy to be here and to discuss with you today. So yeah, I'm Anna Goessens, and I originally started more as general blockchain education and consultancy, and then with my co-founders, we really rolled into self-sovereign identity, the industry, and founded Animo Solutions, which offers development and consultancy on self-sovereign identity issues. And we work a lot in the open source stack and world with the Hyperledger Foundation, so mostly on the Aries and Indie stack. Yeah, and we've been really trying to the social good that you mentioned to bring more and more projects under attention that focus on the social good, because honestly, here in the Netherlands, it's always a bit focus blockchain projects on the banking use cases, the very commercial use cases, which we see just has more touchstones in the community.
Excellent. Well, and I think, self-sovereign identity and the concept of digital identity becomes even more and more important, right, as we move towards this Web3 and new views. And I think, organizations like Animo and individuals like you are going to play a critical part in helping these definitions. So we definitely want to talk a bit about, how can you take these technologies, make sure that they're privacy first and privacy preserving, and it's about the end user. There's a lot of interesting work as well happening in the digital identity space in machines and IoT and other types of identity as well. So we're looking forward to the discussion today. And once again, good morning. I hope you had a good cup of Dutch coffee for us to get started with today. Excellent. Last but not least, Tanvi Ratna, who's the Chief Executive Officer for Policy 4.0. Tanvi, if you can introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about why you think you're here today and what the Policy 4.0 team has been working on.
Thanks, Daniela. It's a pleasure to be here today. I think I'm a bit of an odd one out here in terms of what we focus on. So Policy 4.0 is it's a policy think tank and research and advisory body, which is working on new regulatory frameworks for emerging technology. So we are in the midst of this whole transition in tech. And I think regulators, it's very evident that, regulators are still grappling with Web2 issues and, this dealing with things like cryptocurrency or AI or things like that are challenging. So I think in terms of my background, I was once in a similar position as, some of our fellow panelists. I used to lead blockchain at EY India for certain market segments, and that was a time where we were working on POCs and building out enterprise solutions. By background, I am an engineer, but I've been in the policy space for a long time now. So I used to work with the Indian Prime Minister, and I used to work on Capitol Hill prior to that. We are at the moment working on India's frameworks around CBDC, crypto, and we are working on those issues with around regulators in 22 countries, all the major regions in the world. That is what we do.
I don't think there's no odd people here or odd points of view. And I think that diversity in not only, diversity in gender and what we look like, where we're based out of, but more importantly, in what skills people have in the blockchain space continue to be the most important. We need policymakers, we need regulators, we need social impact leaders, we need lots of different voices working on these things as well. So thank you. As Arun said, I'm Daniela Barbosa. I'm the executive director here at the Hyperledger Foundation. I've been with the Hyperledger Foundation since 2017. Really leading both our community and our members worldwide. And one of the things when I think about why I came to Hyperledger, right? Why I wake up every morning and get to work, and why, at 10 p.m. on a Friday night, I'm having this conversation is because I'm really passionate about the opportunities for good that blockchain technology has. So one of the things that we wanted to talk today about is blockchain for social good, and what are some of the things that many of us are seeing that originally got us involved in blockchain, right? The financial services, Shilpa, I think you mentioned financial services, lots of different use cases as well. Those things get me excited. I mean, those are great things when you think about ways to change how financial systems work. But the social good impact of it, waking up in the morning and saying, I'm here to work on these use cases. I'm here to give voices to people who might not have to do it. So Tanvi, maybe you can tell us a little bit about some use cases that you're seeing at Policy 4.0 specific to inclusivity or social good. In which regions are you seeing some of that work?
Yeah, I think this is a big focus of the CBDC space. I think one of the major motivations in the West is to digitize payments, but as you know, in Asia, a lot of payment infrastructure is already quite digital. So I think a big focus of central banks here is on can it help the cause of financial inclusion? Is there anything it can do to leapfrog, traditional financial infrastructure? So due to the nature of our work, we are under a lot of NDAs, so there's not much that I can say in terms of the actual experiments. There are quite a few underway. I think our regulator, the RBI, is going to announce them in a few months. But I think if you look at basic factors like the cost of compliance, the friction that comes in at the bottom of the pyramid when you're trying to roll out financial services or create financial inclusion, all those things can be streamlined to a very high degree with the CBDC. And India has undertaken very large-scale efforts to create that last mile inclusion with something called the JAM Trinity. So we have digital identity called Aadhaar here in India, and we have very high mobile penetration. So led on that was a bank account scheme that was rolled out by the government called the Jan Dhan Yojana, and that saw certain traction, and I think that gave a lot of learnings to the government in terms of digital banking and financial inclusion by digitization. And I think using those learnings now, there are some pilots getting designed in terms of CBDCs and what can be done differently at the bottom of the pyramid. So I think there are a variety of use cases, whether it's tokenized bonds or it's a variety of financial services that you roll out built on CBDC infrastructure. I mean, in a few months, I think a lot of information on those will be coming out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, in a few months, it's amazing the kind of work that governments like India and others around the world are really accelerating at the pace for these experimentations. So it's great to see. And I know you mentioned a bit about your focus also in working with social good use cases. Can you tell us a little bit, share with us some of the work that you're seeing in your region?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I think in the digital identity space, there's a lot of talk about, for example, refugee IDs, which is a very big use case here, just both on the front of refugees who might have not have access to their physical identities anymore, but also maybe from war-torn regions, if your college degree is suddenly inaccessible because your college doesn't exist anymore. So those kinds of topics I really see living here in this space. I know that currently there's some projects in both in Italy and the Netherlands starting up about solving modern slavery as well. So things you see happening in, for example, Dubai, where people come to work there and their identities are taken away. We really try to focus on restoring ownership of people about their own identity, because this is often lacking currently with physical IDs, which are so easily lost or taken away from people. So I see a lot of work being done there.
Mm-hmm. And explain maybe, or share with the audience a bit about SSI and why SSI enables these new ways for digital identity in use cases like refugees and others as well.
Yeah, so I think just to keep it very short, SSI is where you issue digital credentials to people containing the proof they would require to prove something about themselves. So I would get my driver's license, my college degree, my identity card. I would get them as digital proofs on my mobile phone, and can verify their authenticity just by showing them, which kind of transfers the ability to prove something about yourself to the end user instead of the maybe bank or government party or institution that usually stores this data about you.
Okay. And do you see, specifics? A lot, the audience is global today, but obviously a lot of our regional chapter in India is based in India. Tell us a little bit about what you're seeing in Europe, because I do think that the European states are advancing a lot of these use cases a bit faster than the rest of the world.
I think at the same time, yes and no. So what we are seeing is a lot of European support at the moment. There's really money being put aside by the European Commission to invest in digital identity use cases. So there will be, I think, in 2 years, 5 large-scale pilots throughout Europe, which will definitely use some sort of digital identity technology and wallet building. So there's a lot of support on the governmental level on some sort, but there's still a lot of uncertainty about what standards actually pushing through. So I think there's it's still a question of actually getting it implemented, which is always the case in Europe. So the talk is there, but we still need to do it actually.
Yeah, well, it's the talk is everywhere, right? So it's about implementation as it goes. But maybe Shilpa, if you can talk a little bit about maybe use cases at HCL and you have seen, specific to blockchain for social good, in whichever industries you might have some examples for.
Yes, so we've come across a lot of use cases in blockchain around sustainability across industry, especially like from banks, from government institutes, from supply chain organizations, to essentially be able to track and build trust essentially on the numbers that they're presenting. Because everybody is giving how sustainable an organization is, what are the indexes, but there is no trust around those numbers because the way they are collected is not really visible. So they want to explore blockchain of how that can be, transparency can be brought in that entire process. And it's standardized throughout when reporting is done. So that's one area where we've seen a lot of traction. Another area which was unique, essentially, where we work with governments is building election trust. So we actually built a platform, Electrust. So re-engineering the entire election process on top of blockchain and still keeping the identity, hidden essentially of who's voting for what, but being able to present the outcome. And that garnered a lot of interest in governments where there is a lot of question of whether the election was fair, whether the person should be elected or not. So that's another area where we've seen government showing a lot of interest.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Yeah. I think on the sustainability front, we certainly see a lot of interest and a lot of work and a lot of innovation in this space, especially around climate accounting. Here at the Hyperledger Foundation, we have a climate action special interest group, and there are different projects that are being worked on with some code being written. And I think just when I was in Davos last week, it was certainly a topic of many panels and discussions around how to utilize blockchain technology, specifically to address the issues of tracking and greenwashing, right? Which is, people, organizations and companies basically saying, oh yeah, we're tracking and here's all the numbers and aren't we great? But the reality, to your point, is that there has to be trust in those reporting numbers to do so. And I think, there's a lot of ecosystem building that needs to be done as well to ensure that these systems, continue to be built for the main use, which is for us to understand how can we have an impact from a climate perspective using the technology as well. So those are two great. And voting, obviously, always an interesting use case to discuss specifically from a privacy perspective and a trust perspective as well. So those are two are great. Rohini, maybe you have some examples as well that Infosys and your team have been working on that you can share with us on this topic.
Sure, Daniela. As a matter of fact, now that you brought up this topic, it appears that there is a grain of social good in the blockchain candidates across several industries. So of course, as Anna mentioned, identity, of course, that is perhaps the most important factor, and the example that she cited about tracking identity and credentials for refugees. but even so, in peacetime, in normal circumstances, data privacy is extremely important, given the rising instances of security breach, identity-related fraud. That is one. The second factor is the inefficiencies in the existing identity management practices. Although, across the globe, there have been initiatives that have been started around identity, but there's so much of overhead related to KYC. You go to a bank, you need a separate KYC. You go to another bank, you need another KYC. You buy a piece of property, you have to register it, you need KYC. Education institute, employment. So identity is extremely important. Then there are several others. There's one in crowdfunding charitable initiatives, bringing about transparency. There are so many, there is need for charitable initiatives. There is a need to bring in transparency to encourage more flow of funds. But what is the deterrent for the donors is the lack of transparency, whether the funds that are going in are being channeled for the right purposes. So that is, I would say, another very important dimension. In certain geographies, it has been legalized. In certain geographies, it isn't. But it is an important factor nevertheless. Then I can think of healthcare. Okay, so blockchain can enable a single source of truth for the electronic health records. Again, still under experimentation, but it's extremely important that from the self-sovereign identity perspective, the individual is owner of their records. The individual is the owner of their information, and they choose to share that information with any specific party. That's another one. Life sciences, it protects citizens from counterfeit drugs. Blockchain can ensure, especially in Asia, I think we came across the fact that there are about 30% of drugs in circulation are counterfeits. So channeling it through blockchain. So that's not just applicable to drugs. It's applicable to all kinds of goods. Whether it's a luxury good or anything for that matter, you can trace the source. The traceability and provenance of that particular commodity is extremely important. And finally, in banking, what Tanvi said very appropriately, the objective of CBDC is primarily driven by social good. So whether it is to increase the banking penetration, but also from the perspective of cross-border payments, a very, very important use case, but it's still being experimented, because there were initial challenges, but now CBDC is in the process of trying to address it. There are several discussions that are happening. I just want to cite one small example, where blockchain has a very strong role to play in case of cross-border payments. A person who's employed in a foreign country at perhaps a lower income grade, and this person has to send let's say $100 a week to Philippines, okay, to support a family. In the existing situation, they lose $10 simply by in the correspondent banking circuit, and only $90 is what, and that amounts to a lot. Those $10 mean a lot for the individual. So I think, where social good is concerned, and even ESG, environment, sustainability, and governance, blockchain has tremendous positive ramifications. And, this is one dimension where governments should focus and enhance adoption support to this industry.
Yeah, and certainly from an inclusivity perspective, a lot of the use cases that we're seeing in CBDCs, for example, the Bank of Cambodia with Product Bakan, right? The use cases are really driven by exactly what Rohini just mentioned, which is these use cases around individuals that are in foreign nations and have to, do remittances back home, or, to make sure that they are getting the most value for those transactions, right? Because because they're not getting any value for that $10, right? Ultimately, they're getting less value for that cost. You mentioned healthcare as well, and I think one of the things that we're seeing quite a bit from a healthcare perspective, tied into digital identity and credentialing, is also like cross-state or cross-border health credentials, right? So doctors and nurses, as we become more and more of a global economy, and people need to go across different jurisdictions, yet their licensing needs to pass with them. We're seeing interesting use cases there. And machines, right? Machine identification, specifically in states of regulations, when there's regulated requirements for specific medical devices, for example, how can we use blockchain to track that from an efficiency perspective, from a certifications, a licensing perspective as well. And I think you mentioned pharmaceuticals as well, Rohini, right? Which is one of the things that we have seen over the last 6 years here at the Hyperledger Foundation, but I think overall in the enterprise blockchain market, is when regulations do get started to get discussed or start getting putting into place. For example, in the US, the pharmaceutical supply chain with the FDA, the Federal Drug Administration, put some requirements from a pharma supply tracking. So tell us, maybe, Tanvi, since you do work a lot with the regulators, tell us about how these regulations often, drive these use cases to go into production, to make the technology. We know the technology works, it's scalable, it's, we have these use cases, a lot of them in experimentations, but when regulations do get started, or when they're being put on the table, how does that affect some of these developments?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Daniela. I mean, we don't have too many use cases to go by to see, how regulations will interplay with the blockchain per se, because most of the regulatory attention, as you know, is on crypto-based protocols and use cases. And I think at the moment, because there's this preoccupation with tokens and token regulation, so there isn't as much being put into place on the DLT side, right? One space where that is changing is on the standard side. So that is a place that I'm active in with the ISO. And so there are a lot of attempts to create standards around smart contracts. So we can have interoperability in use cases. You can have a variety of players, leverage the same infrastructure for similar use cases. But I think at the moment, in terms of, giving legal recognition to smart contracts, for example, that is itself an area of very limited progress, right? There are a few states in the US which have done it, for example. There are very few regions of the world that have, gotten there. I think we're still very early in terms of blockchain regulation. But I think things like identity are getting a lot more attention now, especially decentralized identity, DID frameworks. I mean, Canada has done some work on that. There is also, I think on smart contracts, we're still early. I think when that comes in is when you'll see a lot of change in terms of the way business gets done, in terms of how blockchain infrastructure gets leveraged, but still very early for that. And I think at the moment, a lot of preoccupation is on the more of the monetary side of things, and that doesn't have necessarily as many bearings on the DLT infrastructure side. But I think when it comes to things like Rohini had mentioned on cross-border payments and things, there's a lot of focus on that at the moment. So I think in terms of regulatory attention, it's overwhelmingly focused on a few narrower issues. And I think a lot more has to be done in terms of advocacy to sort of put these issues on the agenda for larger blockchain infrastructure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, here at Hyperledger, right, we are a developer community. It's about, the code and the open source. And there's been a lot of discussions around the standards part. And, are the standards moving fast enough? Can we get, standards tend to be slow moving on purpose, I think, right, as community driven efforts. I don't know if anybody has kind of some ideas or additional thoughts on, how standards, play into this, and specifically on the regulation side.
If I may take a shot at that.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think I'll just take a step back into the role of regulators as such, where blockchain is concerned. So I think we all acknowledge that financial services industry has been the trailblazer where blockchain is concerned. They're the ones who have the maximum intermediaries, and therefore the entire essence of blockchain being in disintermediation. They were the ones who were most threatened, and the maximum investments came into blockchain from financial services industry itself. So even in financial services, where the adoption or the start of the blockchain adoption was the earliest, and that's at the most mature stage, in a certain way, the reaction. The startups had already been doing a lot of work around ICOs. They had been launching ICOs, and it was only after a few months that the SEC realized and then clamped down the startups with the Howey test implementation on on the concept of ICOs, the coin offerings, which were not backed by actual assets, and therefore they sort of put it down. But that was more reactive, and it kept running for quite some time. Same is the case for the crypto exchanges. We had instances like what happened with the investors in Quadriga CX. That was a Canada-based exchange where investors lost funds. But what is important to note is that the unfortunate event with the founder happened in a December or a January. I think he passed away, and it was only after a couple of months that it was discovered. Yeah, they were able to trace everything back, but when they were finally able to open up, they found that the funds have been siphoned off long back. And the preceding year of that particular year, for several months, the investors had been raising issues about not being able to redeem their investments, the cryptocurrencies that they had bought through that exchange. But there was no reaction. The regulators perhaps did not do anything. So it is important to realize that there needs to be proactive intervention from regulators, and to do that, they need to take a step back, understand the landscape, understand the technology and the impact and the changes that it brings about, and start working on that. But I think sitting in 2020, in mid-2022, we are seeing a lot of action now. Of course, the earliest was the European Union's markets in crypto assets, MICA, that was activated, to basically create a framework for issuance and trading of crypto assets. And there's a lot of work happening in that direction. Then there was the EPWG mandate, passed by, I think it was the German parliament. The Indian government as well, like Tanvi mentioned, it was in December that we rolled out a framework, and there's quite a lot of study that the Ministry of Electronics and IT has been, MeitY as it is called, has been doing on that. And as recently as the first week of May, the US Senate did not pass the bill, but I think the DLT bill was introduced in the US Senate. So all said and done, it's been more reactive, but it's important for the regulators to get their act together, make it more proactive, and the industry is moving at a rapid pace. It's been evolving really fast. So regulators need to keep pace with that.
Absolutely. I mean, if we told ourselves, 6 years ago or even 7, 8 years ago that we would actually get these kind of statements and bills and laws being worked on across the world, we would all be like, no, that's not going to happen. One of the things that I've said, over the last 2 weeks, a lot of people have been asking, me about my opinion on things like Terra and what's happening in the crypto space. And, I have said this phrase more times than I probably should, but humans are going to human, right? I mean, ultimately, things like the exchange person in QTX, I think it was, right, in Canada, like there's going to be always a human element to these things that we need to put policies and regulations in place to do so. Let's talk a little bit about why in this space, the private sector needs to work with the regulators and the policymakers. It can't just be, driven by the policymakers themselves and the government agencies. So I don't know, Anna, maybe if you have some comments on what you're seeing in Europe as well, where the private sector is, very involved and a pretty loud voice in many of these initiatives.
Yeah, I think that's starting to really become a good thing, because we see a lot of just expertise being built up over the years in the private sector, which is finally being put to use by the regulators. And I, by the way, completely agree with the idea of the proactive regulator being such an important voice, because I know questions are being asked on a regulated level that I know Hyperledger community members working in working groups just know the answers to. That's so I think it's a lot about how can we get unstuck with the old ways of working, where you'd have to navigate through layers and layers of bureaucracy to get those connections between regulatory and private sector, and find much more direct routes of just communicating with each other, because there's a lot of expertise that can be reused.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I mean, it's, reuse and collaboration is specifically a focus on in open source code development, right? Project development. Yeah. And one of the things we're hearing, Hyperledger community has been a strong leader in the central bank digital currency, specifically as the topic that we're talking about now here. And there's many use cases around the world where central banks are either experimenting or even putting into production Hyperledger technologies. And we really, as we talk to the central banks and other, global institutions that work with the central banks, open source is becoming more and more an important element of how governments, policymakers, and the private sector, and even as consumers, right? If we understand that it's open source and the code is being developed in the open, makes us trust or feel a little bit more confident. Maybe, I don't know which panelist wants to maybe make some comments, or a few of you, around how open source and the private sector working with regulators and policymakers. Why is that important for the audience here to understand that today?
Yeah, I can just share a view on this. So essentially, the open source, what it does is it builds, in my opinion, consensus, because it's open for everybody to participate, including the industry, including the consumers of the technology. And it also brings, I would say, the best brains, specialists that can participate in process, which is not possible when you're working on a closed system where you have only few people developing. It also, what it does, it creates a non-proprietary solution, so to say, which is open to be used by a wide variety of people, industry, use cases. It might grow into, as in Hyperledger, from one step to another to another. There's so many projects that are there which are working together, leveraging information from each other, expertise from each other, and then producing outputs for their independent projects. So I think open source is essential when we are trying to build something this large, something this new and innovative in the space. And for private sector has always played this role of, reaching the end mile consumer and presenting their views back to the regulators. So they've always played this role, even in the current, if we look at the monetary or the financial system side, we interact with banks and agents. We don't really interact with government agencies and regulators as much. So they have more view on the usability, accessibility point of view, which is essential for the government. If they launch something, whether the consumers of that service, whether they'll be able to use it or not, whether they'll be able to access it or not, whether it's a service that is needed. For example, when the government of India launched the paper on the services, Hyperledger responded to that, and that's industry expertise being sought and incorporated in the regulation that is getting formed. I think it's absolutely essential for the systems to work, for private participation to be there, and it's not just being one way on the public side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I've had conversations with government agencies across all different sectors, and, understanding that open source doesn't mean that they also have to, hire 1,000 engineers to come and build this, right? But that they have the optionality from a vendor perspective as to who they partner and who they bring on board as well. Any other comments from the rest of the panelists specific to open source and how open source is being used for these use cases?
Yeah, I'd like to state a point there, Daniela. So I think beyond the point, there needs to be cognizance of the fact that the adoption of blockchain across the industry verticals, across multiple industries, is sort of itself a catalyst to its own growth. So, so creating ecosystems, designing an application, bringing in multiple stakeholders, and then beyond the point, of course, there is an important factor of recovering the funds that have gone into the creation of the investment that has gone into the creation of that ecosystem, the ROI. Beyond the point, in order to enhance adoption of blockchain itself, one should think of making the code, the business code for that platform open source, and that could enable several smaller players to partake of it, to sort of customize it into multiple applications, because there's a lot of overlap across industry verticals in several use cases, and doing something like this once the initial ROI has been accomplished, could help facilitate greater adoption of blockchain, because the benefits that blockchain can deliver are humongous, and there needs to be cognizance of that.
Yeah, I love that point, Rohini, about kind of, creating a leverage, a playing field that is available to all, because then what that brings is the diversity aspect of individuals and smaller companies who have different expertise, who are going to approach these issues and these opportunities in a very different way, but having them have the same opportunity to work on, on these codes and solutions as well. Tanvi, maybe from your point of view as a policy, someone that works in policy, specific to open source, do you have any comments or additions to add there?
Yeah, I think I primarily right now, if you see, most of the regulatory work is very focused on crypto and crypto tokens, and I think what has been a sort of slow realization, I feel, for a lot of regulators is that this is what is powering this open source development to a large extent in public blockchains, right? Of course, you have organizations like yours which are doing a great job of it on the DLT side, but the sort of rapid innovation we're seeing in the crypto-driven space is being powered because it's an open ledger. Anyone can join and start building on it, and that whole incentive mechanism is managed by cryptos. And I think that was initially also one of the major things that drew me to this as a person from policy, right? Because it's a very different way of organizing and incentivizing labor, right? And organizing and incentivizing governance systems. And I think the appreciation for that has been very slow in the policy space, right? Because it's been for years seen as a sort of threat to centralized monetary systems, right? And I think that's where you're finally starting to see some evolution. Not across the board, but within some regulators. And I think now, as they're thinking about CBDCs as well, I think one learning or one element of open source that we are starting to think about there is, how do you bring elements of DeFi, for example, into CBDC infrastructure, right? How do you build this kind of decentralized, something akin to API-based infrastructure where you just have different primitives, you're able to sort of bundle them into financial services. How can you bring that sort of advanced thought process into the CBDC space, right? So, sorry, I mean, I took your question more from the monetary lens, but I think open source is pretty much across the board sort of phenomena when you think about blockchain. It's not just in the tech, it's also in the governance, and it's in many other aspects. And I do see finally some aha moments of that, occurring in policy deliberation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So to the two of your points, one is it's also the community building, right? So if you think about what's happening in the permissionless blockchain space, right, there is a lot of community building together, right? And open source projects have been doing this for many, many years, right? We get our developers together, we get them, under a governance model, and we get them to do the work together. So I think that's always exciting. But one of your points that you said, which kind of leads to the next topic, right, which is what is Web3 and like, what is this new digital economy that we are creating? Like the people here on this panel, the developers that are listening and the business folks that are listening and are participating in, certainly in the Hyperledger community, is how are we building these new platforms and infrastructures to create new digital ways to interact? Because it's, a CBDC or a central bank digital currency or even a digital currency as a whole, a lot of people are like, well, I already have payments. I already have electronic payments. I can already, get to the citizens of my country very quickly, relief checks or something, right? Those systems are already put together. But what's very interesting is the infrastructure that's being built to then build these new digital or Web3 infrastructures. Here at the Hyperledger community, I think the work that the community has been doing specifically to digital assets, digital identity, non-fungible tokens or NFTs, is really important. I think leading the way for a lot of our community members to be participating in this. So maybe, we'll go around to talk about, some Web3 use cases that you all might be working on that would be relevant to this discussion today. Who would like to start off? Shilpa, do you want to?
I can. Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry, Anna.
No, sorry.
Go next. Okay.
Yeah. So Web3 actually brings in a lot of new use cases, essentially because it gives the power back of, the user's identity to their own hands. That's where Web3 is special. And it takes away, it's changing that structure where everybody is equal. They own their own data, their own identity, and it's not dependent on these third-party providers, so to say, which was what Web 2.0 did. It brought everybody together, but they took away user data for themselves. So the use cases that we are working on are essentially around digital identity, of how we can maintain digital identity when it comes to Web3. There are some use cases that we're building on metaverse, of how the consumers interact on metaverse, how will they use tokens for doing transaction on metaverse, how will they maintain their wallets. So those are some of the use cases that are there. Then essentially on non-fungible tokens, there is a platform that we are building on Obol, where customers, enterprises can create non-fungible tokens and leverage it for their internal enterprise use cases to distribute bonds on financial side or on the art space as well. So a lot of different use cases that we're exploring, primarily on the wallet and identity side.
Yeah, I think that we as a community need to do a better job at owning what an NFT is, a non-fungible token, because there has been so many use cases and continue to be use cases that are non-fungible tokens, use cases that are not, just avatars on our profiles, that I think is really important. So I like that. And I really, and I'd love to, get some other feedback as well. I do think that Web3 and where we're headed helps with diversity, specifically from a diversity perspective in having more women participate in these ecosystems, having more individuals in regions that in the past just haven't been able to participate in these financial use cases. So I do think that it's a good opportunity. And I know you were going to make some comments there. So what are you working on? What excites you in this space?
Yeah, I think Shilpa really already gave a great overview of everything that's going on in the Web3 space. I think the only thing I would like to add is that what I find really exciting is that it feels that we're finally ready to kind of come out of the different silos of technologies and are finally working on connecting them together. So recently I've been seeing a lot more solutions that work both with a piece of digital identity decentralized and a token. And like I'm finally seeing more interoperability and technology combined, where I used to very much see this is a logistics smart contract project, and this is a digital identity project. And that's, I think, what's really exciting about Web3 is that these things are finally coming together in a major way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, another thing I say very often is, a network of one is no fun, or, it's a block, blockchains of blockchains. Maybe 10 years ago, people were like, well, there's going to be one blockchain that rules them all, and you're going to have one identity, and these specific use cases. And I do think that as the market, changes and matures, interoperability between chains. And there's certainly here in Hyperledger, we're working on this quite a bit with Hyperledger Cactus and some of our other projects as well. And we actually just saw a use case coming out of with Casper Labs and IPWE, which is an IP intellectual property non-fungible token, and then being able to publish that on a public web as well. So there's lots of interesting things happening. Any other comments on the Web3 topic that you're working on that would be helpful for the audience to know?
Yeah, so I think in the educational field, there is, and the second point I think would be linked to this. I think this metaverse has a strong role to play. So think of medical education. Think of the understanding the human anatomy, or and getting into and the surgical details that medical students have to do. Operating the cadaver and getting to learn everything. Imagine the amount of clarity, precision that could be achieved using metaverse, especially for surgeons. I think it has enormous potential. The second is maintenance of areas or zones that are very dangerous. So, for example, maintenance or upkeep of a nuclear plant, where you could potentially avoid, getting a human to enter a very dangerous high radiation zone, and use a robo to use metaverse and fix any issues or perform any maintenance. So I think across the board, this particular dimension applies wherever the physical terrain is very difficult, dangerous, complex. You can leverage metaverse across the board. I would say these are extremely interesting and innovative solutions that metaverse offers.
Yeah, and it's combination of technologies, blockchain, AI, and many others as well. I think for all of us here on the phone, and as we work in the community, it's really thinking about froth, right? The things that the Web3 media wants to pick up on versus these long sustaining models of things that will actually make a huge impact on how societies will operate in the future. So I want to thank everyone for working on this. It's hard. Sometimes, people do chase the headlines and the clickbait, but I think the work and the sustaining models of using technology, digital identity, digital assets, and things around interoperability are quite important, and I know that our community has worked on. So we have had a fantastic discussion today, and the topic of women in blockchain. And I remember a time in technology and very early on in blockchain where it was very hard to get 4 women to talk about the subject and to talk about it with experience for multiple years and doing development and doing implementations and stuff. And I'm extremely proud, specifically in the Hyperledger community, of the strong women that lead our community here. And you have 4 of them here on the phone, on the Zoom, that are participating. Our community at Hyperledger, all the way from the governing board, we have Archana Strichi from Walmart and Hannah Zubko from Intellect EU that serve on our governing board, and many others that are, board members and alternates. We have a technical steering committee that has Tracy Kurt as the chair of the technical steering committee. We have my own role as executive director. It is amazing the kind of leadership that we see specifically from women in the Hyperledger community. And I think, hats off to us for putting us in this situation where we will have an impact and continue to have an impact in the market, and that women, the women participants and leaders in our ecosystem continue to do that. So for all of those listening today who want to have more impact on the blockchain space, maybe we can just go round robin for everybody and talk a bit about what, as a woman and as a woman leader in the blockchain space, what would you say 1 or 2 things to the audience for them to get involved and participate? Anna, we'll start off with you, Rohini, and then, Anna, start with you.
Yeah, I would just say reach out to other women. I think that a thing that I really found very helpful is just started sending messages to, for example, other women CEOs or other women developers, just to connect, not even with an alternative goal in mind, because I've learned so much from these other women as well, just on a personal and a business level. So I think definitely if you're looking to get involved in any way, join open source communication, reach out to people, just connect to each other. Excellent. And Anna, if people want to get in touch with you, how do they go about doing that? Also, LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn or just email me at anna@animo.id. I'm always open to chat. Awesome. Thank you, Anna. Rohini?
Yeah, I think Anna said it. It's very important to collaborate and join such sessions. It was thoroughly enjoyable, very enlightening, Daniela. Thank you for the opportunity. And yes, I'm available on LinkedIn, so I'll be glad to support any initiatives in the open source. And as you're aware, we're keen to partner with you and support initiatives at Hyperledger. Take it forward.
Excellent. Tanvi, any closing remarks on that topic?
Yeah, I think we do. I even got some messages right now about regulatory policy side work. What can we do to work on education initiatives for regulators, or what can we do for representing certain causes or cases in front of regulators. So I've put my email in the chat as well. I've put our organization email, which is admin@policy4.0.com. So you're free to write to us if you want to volunteer some time. I think it helps a lot in taking the cause further. I think any efforts you put towards the regulatory aspect, they have very asymmetric influences on the growth of the ecosystem. So I would very much encourage women to be more active there. So please do write to me. I'm also available on LinkedIn, and I've put our website and email in the chat.
Excellent. Wonderful. Shilpa?
So essentially collaboration is the key. Reach out irrespective whether the person is a man or female. You write to the person you want to learn from, and everyone's accessible. I think LinkedIn is wonderful that way. And participate in forums, communities, anywhere that you can. Ask a lot of questions. I think that's important to grow. Any space that you choose to grow in, especially blockchain. There's a lot of open things there. Yeah, and you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. Just drop a message. I'm sure to respond.
Excellent. Well, it sounds like we have a five pod of power women that we're all connected with. So same here. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Discord. And I look forward to talking to the rest of the community. So once again, thank you, everybody. I'll go ahead and wrap up the panel. Arun, are you going to take it from here?
Hello, thanks, Daniela. We have a developer panel coming up. So all the open source contributors from India region are going to speak to the community after this session. So Deepika, over to you.
Okay,
and thank you again. Thank you.
No, thank you. I will go through the Q&A answers as well and add, since we're going to stay on this line. And if there are any other questions, please do ask there. And once again, thank you to the India regional chapter for this opportunity for us to share our voices.
All right. Thanks, Daniela. That was the perfect segue. Thanks to all the panelists, Anna, Rohini, Tanvi, and Shilpa, who have given us a lot of great insights on blockchain for social good so far. We will now be starting our next panel discussion. Members of the next panel, could you please turn on your video? Okay, awesome. Great. Lovely to have you all here with us. For those of our audience who have just joined us, a very good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. A very warm welcome to the Women in Blockchain panel discussion organized by Hyperledger India chapter in association with Saintgits College of Engineering. We just finished our first panel discussion on blockchain for social good. Hope you had a lot of wonderful takeaways from that session. I know I did. The topic for this panel discussion is Web 2 to Web 3, a developer's perspective and open source contributions. I'm super thrilled to have a lot of amazing panelists here with us today. Thank you so much for taking the time out to be here with us. We're actually hosting this event for the third consecutive year, and it is truly our honor and pleasure to be able to celebrate the exceptional women in this field. I am Deepika Karanji. I work as a software developer at Walmart Global Tech, and I will be moderating the session along with Prisly Jacob from Saintgits. Before we begin the session, Prisly, over to you to introduce our panelists.
Thank you, Deepika. Hello, everyone. So let's start by meeting our panel members. In no particular order, our first panelist is Ankita Patidar. She is a tech lead at AyanWorks and has been working extensively in building decentralized identity solutions using Hyperledger, Aries, Ursa, and Indy. Then we have Neha Mutke, who is working as tech lead at Snapper Future Tech. She has worked on multiple blockchain solutions pertaining to trade finance, supply chain, education, e-governance, etc. She has trained students and working professionals, making them specialized in Ethereum and Hyperledger Fabric blockchain platforms. Next, we have Nidhi Singh, a senior software engineer at Walmart, skilled in blockchain, Hyperledger Fabric and Ethereum. She is a winner of Hyperledger India chapter, HyperHack 2021, and overall winner of Women in Technology Hackathon 2020, organized by WIT in collaboration with IBM. Shwetha Kumari is a lead blockchain developer at HCL. She has 11 years of industry experience and provided solutions on multiple blockchain frameworks like Hyperledger Fabric, Indy, R3 Coda. Looking forward to a very interesting discussion. A very warm welcome to you all.
Thanks, Prisly. Without any further ado, let's start off this panel discussion with our first question to Nidhi. So Nidhi, we know that Web 1 was just static websites. Web 2 brought in a lot of analytics, social media interactions, a lot of user-generated content. And now Web 3.0 is the new thing in, right? So could you help us understand what is Web 3? Why move from Web 2 to Web 3? Is Web 3 just a buzzword, or does it have the potential to truly revolutionize the web as we know it?
Thank you, Deepika, for the question. So let's start with this. I'm sure most of you might have already come across this term Web3. It has been used a lot in the recent few years. And to understand what is Web3, let's take a step back and see the journey of web. So the evolution of web is divided into three stages: Web 1, Web 2, and Web 3. So let's start with what is Web 1. So Web 1 was the initial version of internet, that is World Wide Web. The creator of the World Wide Web, as we call it WWW, was Tim Berners-Lee. So in Web 1, what was the case was it was just static websites which was being hosted by companies, and there was no user interaction between the websites, right? So it was just like we're reading onto something, and I call it a way as in there was just one way of communication or one way of information which was flowing, that is from the websites to the users, and that too with the static content. So that is what Web 1 was. Now let's move to the next stage of web, that is Web 2. So Web 2 is what most of us are experiencing right now, that is Web 2. And it's like, as we all know, it's the internet that we are using today, and it's being provided by the companies. They provide us some service, and in return for that, we are exchanging our data with them. So that is what Web 2 is. And basically, it's like a transition from the static HTML pages to a dynamic content. So now user is having the privilege of generating content on the websites. And for that, it's like we are being provided with platforms where we can interact, we can fill in our data. So that's how we shifted from the static content to a dynamic content, or let me call it user generated content in that way. So that is what Web 2 looks like. And I don't treat this as a technological advancement in that say. I would just say it's a form of a evolution in the way internet is being used, how the users are interacting with the net. So now, as we all know, there is a lot of user interaction and engagement that has been made possible with the help of social media platforms. So this evolution of Web 2 has been done due to the usage of mobile phones, right? Due to the emergence in social media platforms, and also due to the cloud services that are being used. So just to name some of the Web 2 websites that we all use, it's like Facebook, Twitter, and all these are just some of the websites that we use, right? So that's what the Web 2 is. And it brought us, it has brought internet to a large set of people, that is there to the masses. But still the concern is, as we all know, it is being dominated by few set of private companies, right? As in we all know the major tech players, so they are the ones who have a kind of ownership of the internet right now. So that is the concern that is there. And to resolve that, we came up with Web 3. So Web 3 is not a new term which has been coined recently. This was being coined way back in 2014 by Ethereum co-founder Kevin Wood. So that's how old the term Web 3 is. But there has been a lot of buzz in the recent years. I think that is due to the launch and usage of non-fungible tokens and cryptocurrencies around it. So if we talk about Web 3, so the underlying technology would be blockchain is there, and then tokens are there, cryptocurrencies are there, right? And there are other sort of technologies as well, as an artificial intelligence. All those play a very vital role in developing Web 3. And now what will happen is, with the use of Web 3, the ownership would be transferred from those private big tech companies to the users, to us. So that is like a very major transition, if I say. And if you're talking about why should we move from Web 2 to Web 3, so I think some of the major features which Web 3 offers, that has a very important part in it. If we talk about it, as in we all know Web 3 is decentralized, right? So it's not like a single entity would have power over Web 3. The power or the authority is distributed among the stakeholders, and we as users also have the right to become part of the blockchain network. So in that way, we would be also one of the stakeholders of the network. So the power is decentralized. And then what else? If we talk about the way it is structured, so it's like it is open to everyone, right? It is permissionless. In that way, you don't need permission from someone to enter into that space. Whoever you are, wherever you are, Web3 is like open to everybody. Anyone can log in and get started with it. And then there's this other thing. If we talk about, if there is no centralization, as in if there is decentralization, then there is no need of middle party, right? As in the middleman that we had, as in if we talk about the financial domain that we're operating, right? So the legacy system that we operate in, as in we go to bank if you want to have a transaction, right? So bank acts as an intermediary between me and the person to whom I'm sending the money, right? So with Web3, there would be like no middleman in the system. There would be just two parties who directly want to transact with each other, giving them the full authority. So yeah, this is like another important feature which I think plays a very important role.
Yeah, that's actually a pretty great point, Nidhi. So like you did mention that it kind of leads into the next kind of topic that I want to talk about, which is you mentioned a lot of big players controlling a lot of the data that is currently there. And I think there's a lot of debate currently going on between data monarchy versus data democracy, where data monarchy is like most of the data on the internet today is owned by the major players in exchange for the services that they kind of give us. And Web 3.0 is set to kind of bring in that decentralization and data democracy that you just touched upon, right? So Neha, if you can weigh in on this, how does blockchain really fit into creating this kind of data democracy? Can you give us an idea of what a decentralized internet will look like?
Yeah, thank you, Deepika, for this. Okay, so I'll first add some points to what Nidhi said.
Sure.
So, what is Web3? So, Web3 is the Internet of Values, the next iteration of Internet after Web2. So, where Web2 signifies as the centralized model of the internet, where most of the data and services are controlled and managed by some big entities, like we know. Whereas Web3 emphasizes the decentralized model of the internet. So currently the internet which we are using, it is standalone. What I mean to say here is like all the data which is on internet is controlled, owned and managed by these giants like Facebook or Amazon or Flipkart, etc. Even if we have to order something online, we have to be dependent on them. Even banks goes that way. Like we have to make any transaction, we have to dependent on this centralized systems. And as we know, there are many setbacks associated with these centralized systems, which are like we have seen some prominent examples of this setbacks in the past. So in this matter, blockchain plays a very crucial role transforming the conventional approaches for data storage and management. So when we are talking about blockchain, I'm not saying that it is going to disrupt or replace the existing system or any as such, but rather blockchain is going to complement this existing systems to make it even better in terms of privacy, in terms of security. So if you're talking about this, recently I read about this startup in Bangalore, some drive or something, like they are using peer-to-peer cab services, which is based on blockchain. So like they are literally like they're removing the third party interaction. Like we use Ola Ubers for our rides, right? So Ola Ubers take a lot of commissions from the drivers. We don't even know how much the driver gets at the end. But if you're talking about this peer-to-peer decentralized platforms, in that case we are directly contributing to the drivers, we're directly connecting to the drivers. So yeah, that's all I would like to say here.
Okay, great. Those are some really good insights. And also, if I can just chime in here, would you mind turning on camera if you don't mind?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Prisly, over to you.
Okay, so thank you, Neha. Those were some really good insights. So Shwetha, coming to you. Adding to what Nidhi and Neha said, we have understood Web3 is a back-end revolution. So since there is no centralized cloud-based storage here in Web3, where will the data be stored? and how are we actually going to move from centralized systems to decentralized systems?
Okay, thank you all. So what we are doing actually, we are moving from a centralized system to decentralized system. So what needs to be changes required first actually. So we have front end and back end. So front end will remain same. Web3 will be a back end solution, and people using Web3 will not feel any front end changes actually. So what changes we are going to do in the backend? We are going to deploy smart contract in the backend. So let me first explain what about smart contract. The smart contract is what it is a business agreement between two parties. Let me give you one example that is for vending machine based on smart contract. In vending machine, what we have actually the rules of transaction, and that rules of transactions are programmed into the machine. You select a product by placing a number related to the product that you want. What you are doing, you just insert money, and if you insert sufficient money, then the machine spits out the product, and programmed actually program ruled execute, it's a transaction. So the reason for this that what Web2 was front-end revolution, while where pages are dynamic, content of pages are saved into the organization server or a cloud. But Web3 is a back-end revolution. When we say, in other words, Web2 reinvented the things that people interact with, while Web3 reinvents the plumbing behind the scene actually. So, but when we are moving to Web3, then industries have to change their back end and reshape them, while people are not aware of their transformation. And people, for instance, don't need to understand how crypto mining works, because the stuff are hidden in the background. Even the person won't understand I think even the person wouldn't understand blockchain or coin or fungible. So they just want to insert money, and I want to hope that it like a vending machine. So now if you moved from centralized to decentralized, then we have a question like, where will data is going to insert? So in Web2, we have a centralized organization, and centralized organization server or cloud where we have data. So in the decentralized world, users have their own wallet where they keep credentials. So this is basically user controlled web, and we have we have user identity data and the transaction data. So for user identity data, Web1 was actually static sites, and Web2 was attributed to social media and analytics. But to create that social media, I need an email ID, to which I relied on the email provider, which generally asked for my identification as well as the way of phone number or sometimes address too. For example, but with Web3, we are moving a completely autonomic world where I am the owner of my identity. I can create a wallet which will act as my identity. Whenever I go to purchase any goods, for fungible tokens or services. So, and another thing is like transaction data. So the data storage is also being decentralized, and now by way of IPFS and similar decentralized solution in the market for the transaction data.
Yeah, thanks, Shwetha. That was actually super insightful. One of the things you said was, since it is a backend revolution, we will have to reshape the existing backend systems, right? So what is the kind of effort that would probably go into reshaping backend as we know it?
Reshaping backend in the means like what we are doing, we are not going to change the front end application. In the backend, we have a blockchain network, and prominently in the blockchain network, we are using Ethereum blockchain. So we are just changing in the backend centralized system to this Ethereum blockchain network, where we have a distributed ledger and decentralized.
Okay, so prominently the kind of change that would occur in the backend is the way we store the data and identity management. Would that be right?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Also, maybe Ankita, you can weigh in on this, right? So Shwetha was mentioning about smart contracts, and usually when people think of Web 3.0, the two main tracks that we think of is firstly building applications on top of blockchain, or solutioning with smart contracts. So for people who are just kind of getting into the blockchain space, what would you say are the different kind of roadmaps to explore to enter into the Web 3.0 movement?
So as my fellow panelists already explained what a Web 1, Web 2 and Web 3 is. So it's a shift in paradigm. It's a shift how we work, we store and we manage our data, or how our applications are working. So whenever there is a shift, we have to come together, right? And we have to work together. So first of all, for the people who are starting with blockchain or starting with Web 3.0, you can understand the challenges that are there in Web 2.0 and how Web 3.0 can overcome those challenges, and or how Web 3.0 can solve those problems. Once you have a clear idea, or once you get the problems that are into the existing system, then you'll be able to get to the solution of it that Web 3.0 provides. So in this way, anyone can enter, or you can get through the understanding of Web 3.0 in a clear way, how it can change the life, or how it can change the work in the way we work today.
Yeah, definitely. But if we are looking at the different tracks available to us, right? Maybe Neha or Nidhi, one of you can weigh in on this. What are the key skill sets that would be required to kind of become a developer? Is it just front end? Are we looking at just front end, or some kind of networking skills that are required, hosting, cloud, DevOps? What are the different tracks available for us?
So since it's a decentralized network in itself, so backend is one thing. You want to have, as a developer, I want to start. You have to start with the backend, how it works, how the data is stored. As previously someone said, that there is a change in how data is stored. So backend is one thing, but since the network is also going to change, it is no more a decentralized network, right? Now there is no one authority that manage everything. The network is decentralized. So the networking part, the security, then if my data is decentralized, it is available on different machines, different servers, it is hosted at different places, right? And the replication is also there in the different places. So how the security of the data, how the visibility, and what data to put on which blockchain. There are different kind of blockchains are also public, permissionless, right? So which type of blockchain you want to choose, because it goes with what data we want to store on blockchain.
Got
so
it.
Backend, there are different languages. So backend is one thing, networking is another part. Then we don't want consumer to be affected by the shift that we are doing in the paradigm. If I am using a mobile app to book something, I want it to be the same. But just that the backend should change in such a way to adapt, not to store the user's personal information on the app or on the application. That is how the networking and backend can change without affecting the front end much.
Thanks, Ankita. Prisly, do you want to take over?
Yes, so Neha, coming back to you, being a blockchain developer yourself, what do you think are the skill sets needed to become a blockchain developer?
Yeah, Prisly. So if anyone wants to enter into blockchain space as a developer, in that case, obviously some basic knowledge of backend technologies, like some languages, some programming language knowledge is obviously important. And as Ankita stated, backend and networking both changes. So in that case, yeah, obviously those things we need to keep it in mind when we are entering into blockchain space.
Okay, so would that be it?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Neha. So Coming to Nidhi, from what we have heard till now, open source seems to be a great way to get started in blockchain, right? So how can one start contributing to open source? And what are the prerequisites for making your first contribution?
Okay, so for this, I would like to start it with how I started. So initially, when I moved into the blockchain space, I started working on Ethereum framework, which is one of the blockchain framework which is publicly available. And then I transitioned to the Hyperledger umbrella foundation. That is, they have multiple frameworks within them. All are for enterprise applications. So that's how I started. And yeah, if someone wants to get started with blockchain, I think one of the best way, as you rightly said, could be to start contributing to open source community as soon as you can. So I think this would be very beneficial to the college students or the persons who just want to get started into blockchain, who are relatively new to this space. So what they can do is they can, if we talk about open source, so many of the blockchain frameworks are open source, right? And there's this Hyperledger Foundation, which is like an open source community. So there are different blockchain frameworks out there. So what you can do is you can get started with them. You can check out the repositories, you can go through the code, you can start using the applications. If you discover some issues, you can create that issue. If you are a technical person, then you can also help in contributing to the code by actually raising a pull request, right? So these are some of the ways by which you can get started. And then if you're someone who wants to get into this thing, I mean, there's this other sort of program which Hyperledger has, which is like the Hyperledger mentorship program, right? So anyone who wants to enroll in these sort of programs, they can have a proper mentor for them, and then they can walk through them. So there would be different use cases to work upon. So I think these are some of the very good ways to get started. And if you are at such a level where you have worked in the industry for some time, and then you want to prove your worth, then you can go about going for some certifications on top of it. So let's say that different sort of certifications, as in for Hyperledger, there are certain certifications. For R3 Corda, there are certain other set of certifications which are being provided by the foundation itself, or there are many third parties are also providing their own certifications and trainings, right? So that is another way. If you want to prove your worth, if you want to really test your knowledge that I have done this much, and do I have this much knowledge on that sort of things? If you want to test your skill, the certification is another way to go about getting started with things and proving your worth. So yeah, I think these are some of the ways by which people can get started with your blockchain journey. Yeah.
Okay, so as you had mentioned, Hyperledger itself has many projects, right? So like, how can we pick one from among those to start contributing to?
Okay, so it's like Hyperledger has many reality platforms. The most famous, popular, and tested and proven platform is Hyperledger Fabric. So feel free to explore that code. And if you want to, it's like if you want to get involved in this, there is this other thing which is going on, which is like Hyperledger Challenge. So my team is also a participant there. So it's like, if you want to contribute to our project, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. We would be very much happy to have you with us. And in that way, you can take your few, it's like baby step, you can take baby steps towards your journey. So it's not just about Fabric. There are different projects as in Hyperledger, Sawtooth is there, Besu is there, Burrow is there. So you can go to the Hyperledger GitHub and you can just explore all those projects, and there are certain pull requests which are for starters. So they have this tag and you can just start exploring there.
Yeah, those are some really great insights to kind of get started and get hands-on with blockchain. You know, so far, a lot of people that I speak to, they think blockchain is this sci-fi thing and you shouldn't touch it. You know, it's really scary, so don't go there, kind of a thing. But I think once you start getting hands-on with the community, talking to people and talking to amazing ladies like yourself, things become a lot easier, right? Like you just need a starting point, and from there on, once you get hands-on, things become a bit easier. There was this one question that we had from, like a lot of you mentioned, Ankita, Shwetha, Nidhi, Neha, all of you mentioned that Web 1 to 2 and now to 3, it's a back-end shift and it's a paradigm shift kind of a thing. So how do you store huge amounts of data in a decentralized database? I mean, I do understand that the concept of distributed ledgers, right? But there's a lot of data that needs to be transferred. So if you take a look at an example, say Instagram or Facebook, the amounts of data that they store is insane. So how do you store all of that data in a decentralized way where people like you and me are actually participants or stakeholders on the new blockchain network? Any one of you can take it.
So while storing the data, we have to keep in mind that what we want to keep on blockchain, first of all, because if anything goes on blockchain, you cannot delete it, right? It is immutable. So what we want to keep on blockchain is one thing that we have to be conscious about. As we know, there are so many regulatories being formed, like Private Data Protection Act and GDPR, which don't allow PII information to be stored on blockchain, right? So that itself limits the data that we are storing for as of now on our systems, centralized systems. So we should avoid storing PII information on blockchains, first of all. Then there are something called distributed file systems, IPFS, that we can use to store the huge amount of data, and just putting the
Everyone, looks like we're facing a bit of a technical issue with Zoom. We'll be right back.
So I believe all of us are back.
It's a Zoom issue or what happened? I thought my internet.
Yeah, I think all of us assumed our internet went, but yeah.
I guess that was a Zoom issue.
Arun, can we just check on Ankita if that's possible?
Sure.
Yeah, I think she's here now. Hey, Ankita. Sorry, you got cut off midway by Zoom. Go on.
Yeah. So I was talking about the data that we want to save on blockchain, right? So first of all, there are so many regulations that we have, like which don't allow us to store PII information on the ledger, right? Because once it goes to ledger, you cannot delete it as immutable. And since it is distributed, the copy will be with everyone in the network. So before storing anything on the blockchain, we have to be conscious about what we are putting on blockchain, first of all. If we have huge amount of data, like any files, there are files that we files, images and everything. There is something called IPFS, that is distributed file system. So we can put our data on IPFS, and then we can just point the hash of that data IPFS on the blockchain network. That will help us to minimize the data storage on the blockchain. And we can store some things off the chain as well, off ledger too, if we don't want them on blockchain, if they are not meant to be verified and to be the same way, right? So we can put them off the blockchain as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think what you were talking about, storing hashes of it on the blockchain, kind of leads us to the layer 2 solutions that exist. Would any of the panelists like to comment on how that would be helpful in building scalable blockchain solutions in Web 3.0? Shwetha, Nidhi?
Okay. Okay, I will take this question. I think the basic problem with public blockchains out there, as we all know, Ethereum and others, it's the performance that they provide, right? They are not very much scalable. If we talk about the throughput or the transaction per second, that is relatively low, as in drastically low when compared to the other blockchains and how it should be in the practical world. You can't be using a system in a production grade environment which is having very low throughput. I mean, that's not the kind of user experience you want to give. And so for that, there are certain solutions which are being developed. So it's like there are these layer 2 solutions, which are like, if you want to improve the scalability of the blockchain networks, we are improving the scalability off chain. We are not doing it on chain. We are trying to store it into the off chain. And then we are trying to improve the scalability by using side chains and other sort of things. So I think many companies out there are trying to work on the scalability part so that the blockchain frameworks that we have, they could be really beneficial in our real world and at a very huge scale. So, and there's also this thing, if we talk about, there's also a privacy concern, right? So it's like if we are on public blockchains, so it's always about this privacy concern. So there are some solutions which are being developed around that as well. So I think it's still a work in progress, if I say that way. I mean, there are many things which have been done, but I feel there's a long way to go if you want to really adopt into the version that we all want to be in Web3. So yeah, it's still a long journey there.
Yeah, definitely. I think everything's a work in progress, right? Web 2 is also still evolving, and now Web 3 is something that will evolve parallelly. So yeah, thanks for that. Shwetha or maybe Neha, could you give us an idea of what your day-to-day life looks like as a blockchain developer? Any one of you? Shwetha, you can take this if you want.
Okay. So day-to-day life, like we are talking about here, Web 2 to Web 3 transition. So the world is going to change. Like we are entering into the new internet era. So if we are entering into the new internet era, so lots of things going to change. The system, governance system that is based on the centralized, that is going to the decentralized. We are removing actually intermediate parties. So we have lots of use cases like in the supply chain management, in finance sector, and other sectors. So blockchain in the future, blockchain is like a revolution. And I can see in 4 or 5 years, we will see a lots of changes through the blockchain technology actually.
Yeah, like you mentioned, there's been a lot of there are a lot of use cases in supply chain, trade, finance, and all. And Neha, I think you mentioned that you have worked quite extensively for solutioning in those particular domains. Could you give us some examples, any cool stories that you have in this particular thing?
Yeah, so like I would like to say the one of the first project what we started with Snapper, that is Snapcert. So like basically Snapcert is the certificate generation and verification platform on blockchain. So when we started, we first created a POC on Ethereum, and after Ethereum we shifted it to Hyperledger Fabric. So they like if we see the background verification companies, when we talk about the corporates, they go through the background verification process for any new candidate, right? So in that case, it takes a lot of efforts, it takes a lot of time and energy and cost, right? So Snapcert, what Snapcert do is Snapcert is cutting up the cost and it saves the time from them. And after that, we have worked on snap chain, like trace chain. Trace chain is basically a traceability solution on blockchain for any kind of goods which we from the distributor till the or like a consumer who's going to consume that particular food. So yeah.
That's pretty interesting. Do any of the other developers have some interesting use cases that you've probably worked on that you can share with us? Ankita?
Yeah. So since blockchain has its own steep learning curve, right? It's all new when we come to blockchain. It beat anyone. If you take Ethereum, when you have started Ethereum, it was new. It had a learning curve that we went through. So here at AyanWorks, we are extensively working in decentralized identity system. So we had a couple of things on Hyperledger Fabric as well. And now we are working on Hyperledger NDA resource that is verifiable credential and decentralized identity. That truly owner is I am the owner of my identity, like that. So when we started this, we have our own platform called Credible. So when we started Credible, we started with the mobile. It had a mobile wallet, as Shwetha mentioned, that user should have its own control of the data, right? So we want a mobile wallet for everyone. So we started developing Animo SDK, that is the first React Native SDK for the same. So we had like a couple of nights and days spending on the problems that we have. There are standards and Hyperledger Fabric that areas also have some protocols, right? So there was no implementation for mobile per se. So we had to develop for basic iOS and Android development and then React Native. So we were stuck at 2-3 points, and all the developers who are not iOS, but we want to get ourselves this thing done, and we were ready to get our hands dirty in that, but we just want to get it done. So it's like at nights 2 a.m., 3 a.m. we said, I will sit and we'll check, and things work. So those were pretty interesting days, and when the technology was maturing, or when all the protocols were not there. But as a developer, we always have that feeling that whatever comes up with me, I will try to solve it on my own. Like beat it from any language, then language is not a barrier for a developer. It's like the logics matters there, right? So as a blockchain developer too, language is like a secondary thing for us, because here framework matters for us. Framework, tools, those matters for us. So we, so I mean, those were like the days when I remember that when we started building Animo. So we had to put in everything there, what we want from Python. We saw from Python agent, we refer .NET, and then we built in React Native. So yeah, those are the interesting things.
That's actually pretty cool, because I think yeah, sorry, you were saying something.
No, I'm Shwetha actually.
So
sure.
Go ahead.
Ankita is saying, she's developing Hyperledger ND solution. So I was also developing Hyperledger ND solution based on self-sovereign identity. So we have ND network, and we have Aries Cloud Agent using Python API, and we are using Xamarin framework to create mobile wallet. So basically, what I have done, completely on Indie network side, where infra setup. So we have set up the multi-host, multi-zone, multi-node Indie network. And one issue I was facing during the rehydration of Indie network, actually, what happened in Hyperledger Fabric case, we have container name actually. But in Indie, actually, what happened when we are creating the node, so we are providing IP address, and that IP address actually Indie has a Merkle tree structure. So that that IP address is saving into the Merkle tree. So when the rehydration process comes, like when in case of any crash of network, and I have to restore the network on other host machines or other multi-host machines. So in that case, means what happened when I try to restart the network with existing node configuration as well with existing node data. So I was facing that time error. So in the what issue, so for that fixed, what I have done, when I am creating a pool transaction genesis file, in pool transaction genesis file, instead of providing the providing IP address, I was providing a domain name and create mapped that domain name with the IP address. So easily we are able to restore the ND network hyperledger. So that issue was fixed actually.
That's really awesome to hear that, in the end, I fixed it. Like, that's the goal of, I think, every developer. So kudos. Good job. Thank you for sharing your story with us. Nidhi, I think we have listened to 3 interesting problems that were solved by 3 of our panelists. Do you have something interesting to share?
Yeah, sure. I think the main gist of everyone would be they face some issues, and then the moment when they overcame that thing, that feeling, and I think that's what matters the most, right? If you're facing some issue somewhere and then you're able to resolve it. So talking about some of the use cases on which I've worked on, I worked on Ethereum space. So it's like I've done a few proof of concepts related to the, crowdfunding platforms. And then the interesting use case, which I would say it's all about the scale, right? So when I was part of Geo, there we built a solution for the telecom subscribers in India. That is like the anti-spam use case. So as all of us know, we get spam calls and messages every day. So that was the use case, as in if there's something going on, we have the provision of raising a complaint against that person. And then if you don't want such messages or calls to be delivered to you, then we also have the provision of setting preference. So everything, I mean, all the things which telecom subscribers in India do, that is being handled on blockchain right now. So that project is already in production, it's live, and it is due to support of all the telecom service providers in India, not just Geo. Everyone is out there in the network. So I think that is one of the use case which was interesting to me, like handling data at scale. And then it's all about my data as well, as in I am a telecom subscriber, so I can actually see what's happening out there. So that's what makes it even more interesting.
Thank you, Nidhi. Now, coming to a different topic, digital currencies. So, can any one of you throw light on digital currencies? How are they important? And if they can, in sometime in future, completely replace today's currencies? Anyone can take up the question. Neha, Shwetha, anyone?
Maybe Neha or Shwetha, do you want to take it?
I think Ankita was going to speak. Yes, please continue.
Yeah. So since blockchain is, it is meant to complement the systems, the existing systems, right? So it can complement the existing system very well by providing the solutions for the problems that we are facing. Similarly, digital currencies are, I mean, it will replace the existing currencies that are using in our country. So it will be like a huge regulatory decision as well, and adoption as well, because people need to be educated about it, about using digital currencies too. So digital currencies are the medium to exchange goods, exchange data, and you can use the digital currencies in many of the use cases just to get the loyalty points, right? So you can somewhere else. They can complement the existing systems of currency that we have, but I think it will be very difficult to say that they will replace the existing systems.
Yeah, definitely, fair enough. It's always difficult to replace something that has been established for hundreds, if not thousands of years, right? Neha, would you like to weigh in on this?
Yeah, I agree. Whatever Ankita has said, like, yeah, like we cannot just replace whatever is going on, and we just have to complement. Blockchain is just going to complement with whatever we are using right now as well. Wherever we are using these digital currencies, we have to buy them through fiat currencies only. So, yeah, that's how it's going to go.
Okay, awesome. So I think we are reaching the end of our time for this particular panel discussion. Do any of you have any any comments to share for budding enthusiasts in blockchain, budding developers, something that you think you wish someone had told you when you initially started off your journey? Neha, maybe we can start with you and then over to Shwetha, Ankita, and Nidhi. Is it just me or?
Yeah, you can do it.
Okay. I think Neha is stuck. Okay. Shwetha, can you take this? Maybe we'll come back.
I have started blockchain career before 3-4 years. So started with like blockchain concepts. So initially we have a Bitcoin. So initially what I understand, blockchain is nothing but it is a Bitcoin currency. Like the people are thinking like in that way. And then after started the fabric setup. So we have actually fabric setup. We have the infra setup and we have application setup. Both are. So it was not easy. So like initially I have a challenges. Actually, I was a Java developer, but I don't have much idea about network side. So I boosted up on that Docker, Kubernetes, other things also. So now I become expertise in that way. But I would encourage to the people, please join blockchain. We have a Hyperledger forum and other forums where you will easily get your answer if you are facing any challenges. So really come to the blockchain world and join this one.
Thanks. That was pretty passionate. Ankita, would you like to go next?
Yeah. So you can just start with doing things. I mean, there are plethora of things in the blockchain space as well. So just if you get the problem, just go on it. If you want to start, there are so many repositories, as already Nidhi and everyone mentioned, that there are so many repositories. There are some special tags for starters, good first issues. They put a tag. If you are a starter, you can pick that issue because that is a small one that you can pick. If you have, the community is very supportive and in all the frameworks or all the tools. So if you have an idea, you can put an issue, you can open an issue, you can discuss on community. Discord is the channel that community uses. You can put an email to the community as well. So just start and flow with the paradigm shift that we are into for the better future, I can say.
Yeah, definitely. Neha, okay, I think we lost her again. Sure. Nidhi, would you like to weigh in here? Maybe not specific to open source contributions, but just in general, what inspired you to kind of get started with blockchain? And once you started, what are the kind of language skills or framework skills that you personally acquired? And you did mention that there are a lot of certifications that you can take up to kind of test your knowledge of whatever you have learned. So just tell us a little bit about your journey as a developer.
Okay. So my journey started way back, I think in 2018. So at that time, there was not a lot of resources out there in the public domain that could actually help you. I mean, there were limited resources. Now, I feel what is the best part about starting now is that there's a lot of awareness about the technology, right? As it's like it's no longer, people don't associate blockchain with Bitcoin right now. So that phase is gone, and we are ahead of that time. So it's very glad to see the industry progressing. So the things are moving in a positive direction. So I feel for starting now, there are many things as we already discussed. And my journey was, it was like, as I told you, I started with Ethereum. I've done few POCs there. And then it's like, I personally like participating in tech events and initiatives, right? So I have been a participant in many of the hackathons, and it's very good to actually participate in these tech events because you come up with a problem statement and then you try to propose a solution to it. So in that way, it's not just about blockchain, you are designing a system end to end. As in, if I pick any of the problem statement, I have to really think that who would be my target audience, why I'm designing this, what issues are being addressed by my solution, and is it a good market fit or not. So if you want to get started, I think one of the major things I feel has benefited me in my journey has been to participating in such tech events and hackathons. It's like it gives a wide exposure, and then there are different teams with which you're competing. So you got to know certain good ideas from various people, right? As in, if I'm building something, other person will be building something else, and I can get to know, okay, these are some of the use cases which I can explore. So in that way, it's a very insightful thing to participate in such events. Even if you don't win it, the whole journey of participating is, I think it's very much fruitful. So that is another thing which people can explore, join the community in such tech events. And then if you're stuck at any of the phase in your submission or in your participation, feel free to reach out to any of the mentors or anyone. There is a huge community that we have, right? The people who are there in this forum, they are some of the best people to approach. So I think these are some of the ways by which we can get started. And yeah, that way we can come up with actual use cases. So right. Yeah, so I think that would be like that's what I would say.
Yeah, I completely relate with you on that, because that's kind of how I got started with blockchain as well, through a hackathon. And hackathons give you a lot of exposure to learn a lot in very, very little time. And I think the competitive spirit is also there. The team spirit also comes into the picture. And also, I think, yeah, hackathons are a great way to get started. And like you mentioned, Hyperledger India, the challenge is currently going on, which is a global challenge. And there's been India challenges as well in the past. The community at Hyperledger has been great. So for anyone who's, for our audience members who wish to kind of get involved, there's a lot of scope for document creation, being subject matter experts, helping in organizing a lot of these local meetups that happen, supporting the community members through the various Discord channels, be it on any project, be it Aries or Fabric or Indie or anything. Any issue that you face, you can always help out your fellow developers on those channels. So it's a very, very open forum. And I think I can say this from firsthand experience, because I was a newbie as well, and I still consider myself a newbie. And I'm here today because I've been given this opportunity to be able to speak to all these amazing developers, simply because I chose to get involved in the community and be very proactive about it by attending the meetups regularly and participating in a lot of community level discussions that do happen. So it is an open forum, and open source is about taking that self-initiative. There is no end reward or end goal, or no one's going to force you to do anything. You just got to be really proactive and be passionate about the technology and be passionate about really helping people, because at the end of the day, when you help others, you learn as well, right? So I think that's kind of what helped me get really hands-on with blockchain, and I'm sure this resonates with a lot of our panelists as well. So I think that would be the wrap of this session. It's been an absolutely wonderful treat to host all of you, Shwetha, Nidhi, Ankita, and Neha, who unfortunately got dropped again. So the internet is not perfect, clearly, but Web 3.0 is something that we can definitely look forward to. And it's we can be one of the few early adapters to the technology and really get to be able to get really involved as a part of it, if that's something that we're really interested on. If there are any closing notes, then please feel free to share. Else I'd like to hand it off to Arun and then to Prisly.
It was great to be here talking to all the ladies out there. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks, Ankita. Neha, do we have you here? Okay. Shwetha, Nidhi, any closing notes? Shwetha, you're on mute.
Sorry. Thank you, Hyperledger India chapter, giving me this opportunity. Thank you all. We will meet again.
Yeah, it's a pretty small, but also a really huge community. So yeah, we will definitely meet again. Prisly, do you want to, or Nidhi, do you have anything to share?
I just wanted to thank the Hyperledger India chapter for organizing such an awesome event. I feel very privileged to interact with such awesome women out there, and it's always good to interact with like-minded people. So yeah, it was an awesome conversation we had.
Yeah, glad you really enjoyed it. I think me and Prisly and everyone else on the panel and our lovely audience enjoyed it a lot as well. Like I said, it's a huge community, but if you choose to be involved, it can be a pretty close-knit community as well. So do take part. It's going to be an awesome journey once you decide to get involved. Prisly, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Deepika. So as we are winding up our session today, we would like to thank all our panelists once again, Ankita, Neha, Nidhi, and Shwetha, for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us today and for sharing your valuable insights with us. Also, we would like to thank Hyperledger India chapter and Saintgits groups of institutions for providing opportunities for our communities to speak more about these upcoming technologies and to learn from one another. Also, thank you, Arun, Jubilant, Kamlesh, and Vikram, and everybody else who supported in organizing this event and putting it together. And a big thank you to all our lovely audience members for joining us today. Thank you all and have a great day.
Thanks, Prisly. Arun, over to you.
Yes. So as we wrap for today's session, I just wanted to remind